to count heads, what we want to focus on is a particular view. And that view, the best view and optimal view to count heads, is actually to make sure that you are in profile view. Okay, so this is a side view, and you don't want to do any other views to count heads. And the purpose of counting heads is just to give us a rough idea of the relationship between how tall your animal will be and how long your animal will be in sculpture mode. All right, so the thing is that we're going off of a two-dimensional image. All right, and if we go to the other dimension, if you think about your imagination, it's very abstract. I don't even know what dimension that exists in, right? Because inside your brain, there's an imagination that occurs in there. Like, for instance, if you have your eyes closed and I mention giraffe, for some reason, because of the experiences that we've had on this earth, whether you've seen a giraffe in person, whether you've seen a giraffe on the National Geographic or somewhere on YouTube, or you have read a book about giraffes, you have an image about it. So we have that dimension of memory, all right? And in our world that we live in, you can see my fingers, right? This is a digital world. This is a dimension. But if you print your photo out, you're actually experiencing the image in a two-dimensional way, right? Now, if I were to give you a cup, right, and you guys have made a bowl, right, you're experiencing that whole thing in 3D, right? You could fill this up. It gets filled with liquid or food, whatever it may be. It has actual texture. This exists in the 3D world. However, even though this paper, it does have dimension, there's a certain width to it, the image that's actually on the paper is two-dimensional. So while the paper is 3D, the image is not, okay? And so the challenge of making sculpture, okay, initially as a beginner, is going from the two-dimensional realm, right, and translating that image into a 3D shape, all right? Now, shapes is two-dimensional and form is 3D. So we're going to convert eventually what we have as a shape, and we're going into 3D, which is what we call form, all right? And this whole project of counting heads, all right, gives us, it's just a tool. All right, counting heads is a tool to enable us to make sure that we are close in our estimation about the relationship between the whole animal, right? The length, the height, right? We don't want to create a rhino if we're creating a rhino and it's super tall like a giraffe. That wouldn't make sense. Visually, people will see, I will see when I begin to make judgments about your work, how procedurally, how you're making the artwork. Like, were you following the tools that I've given you? Were you following the keystones that I gave you to complete the project? Like, for instance, this is going to be a keystone for your project. And what I mean by a keystone is that it is the key to make sure that whatever you set your project to be, whatever, if it is a bird, a dog, cat, whatever it is, you're using the same vehicle, okay, the same keystone to execute your project. Now, when we count heads, we are looking for a relationship, okay? So this relationship that we're looking for is the length versus, I'm just going to put X, okay, versus the height. That is the relationship. And so this can also be expressed as L times H, all right? So length and height. Now, if you were going to go to a store and buy shelving, right? There are actually more dimensions. You have length times height times width, right? There's another dimension to it. But for the purposes of ratios, because ratios are relationships, right? Like a ratio is how one part relates to the whole. We're pretty much taking a standard unit, which this exercise is called counting heads. We're taking a single unit, which in this case, we're going to go ahead and take the unit of a head. Okay. And I'm going to cut off the horn right here, and I'm going to go about to like where the tip of the lips are. All right. So let me see if I could switch it on my camera here. It's too close. All right. So that head relationship right there, that's about 1 unit. All right. So the unit, 1 unit equals 1 head. That is the unit that we're counting. And we're trying to see how many units across this is. Another way of saying unit is head. Now, if we were to use a ruler, you can go ahead and do that. But, you know, depending on how you, you know, create the photo, right? Let's say this photo right here, as it exists on, you know, my desk, right? If I were to put my hand right here, that's about how long this animal is. My wrist is about right here, and that's where the butt here, the end of that rhino is. And you could just see that it's a little bit bigger than my hand. Now, let's say that you get a photo off the internet, but it happens to be smaller, and you use a ruler, then it tends, that ratio, although you can measure it out, it's going to be a lot smaller. You may not be measuring in inches, you may be measuring in fractions of an inch, and that could be a little bit more confusing. And you know, I don't want to teach the ruler right now. What I really want to mainly teach is, you know, let's work with what we got. We all have hands, fists. That's why when I had you guys create the first bowl, the unit that I asked you to use was your own hand. Ball up your fist and make sure you have the same size as your hand. When we actually begin this project on Friday, there are a few things that need to happen. You obviously have to take your notes, submit that. But on Friday, when we set up, we're going to get the initial amounts of clay for this project, and it's going to amount to about 3.5 to 4.5 fists of clay. So, Casey, I see you on camera, ball up your fist, right? You're going to have 3.5 to 4.5 times the amount of clay that you have, that you see right in front of you, all right? Now, if you have a really big hand, let's say, I don't know if I have any football players in here. I think I had a chance to meet all of you, but I haven't seen someone that's like 6'5", 6'8", or something, and your fist is like the size of, I don't know, my head, then I'll take into consideration, all right? But for the most part, everyone seems pretty average in terms of hand sizes, all right? So what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and count the L value. All right. So I'm just going to go here, put an arrow so we can keep track. If for some reason my view, right, what you see here, if I go off the page, you just let me know if I happen to go over the page and you can't see it. But anyway, this unit here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take this length. Now what you could do, I have this like battery here from my camera, and it's like the same width as the rhino. And so I'm not actually going to use it as a tool, but if you don't have something the width of this guy here, you could use just your pen. All right. So you're going to need 2 hands. Now what I'm going to do is I'll actually go from here where the tip of the nose or lips are. I'm not going to include the horn. We'll include the horn later, all right, when we're actually building it. I call this part an accessory. It's like an extra. So if you happen to have an animal with a tail, those are extra. We'll add those on later on, okay? When you watch the video, it'll make sense. But anyway, we're going to take this head unit, and I'm going to pinch with my index finger and thumb where the beginning of the lips are. And then I'm going to point the felt pen, right, where I dashed right here. That's 1 unit. And what you could do next is, eventually we're going to travel to the butt, okay? We're eventually going to reach there. So on the rear of this rhino, that's where we're trying to get to. So that's 1 head unit. This is 2. And I'm just going to mark. And I'll go ahead and I'll reset, make sure I have the same unit. 3. Oops, messed up. 3. 4. You see how I'm moving my fingers so I can indicate how long it is. And then here we go. This is the last one. All right, and I'll mark right there. And that's 5. Now the butt is right here, right? That's the rear of the rhino. And we always want to do this. Doesn't matter if it's sitting down or if it's, you know, on all fours. This is number 4. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, right? 5. I'm just gonna round up. Now, I know that it's under 5, right? But the length of this rhino is about 5 heads long. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a little bit under 5, but I'm just for how close that is right there. I don't know if you could see it, right? For how close it is, I'm just gonna round up and call it the length 5, okay? So 5 by, and what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna take another measurement, okay? So this unit right here with the 2 dashed lines, that's for the length. Now I'm gonna go ahead and start another measurement and we're gonna go up and down, all right? But what I wanna do is take the length from the bottom of the lowest part, which is this, this part here. I'll draw this one solid line. And then where I consider the top of the head, I'll actually go just above the ear, all right? So this is my unit here. And I'm just gonna box it out. All right, so this unit right there, that's my head unit for the height. And what I'm gonna do is I'm actually just gonna use my pen and I'm gonna start off and I'll measure from like the lowest part, which is this foot right here. That's gonna be the lowest point. And I'm just gonna see how many heads tall this guy is. And as you can see, it has a pretty big head. You may not have considered how long that head is until now. Maybe you pictured a rhino to have, you know, a pretty big head, but you didn't realize how big that head was or how long it was. But anyway, we're gonna measure and I'll have a stop right here because this is the top of the tallest part. It looks like the profile photo. You'll have the head, there's a little bump right there, it goes down, and then there's another hump that goes right here, and I think that's the highest point. And we'll see how many heads tall this is. We got 1. And then we have the length, right? That's where it is. So I'm gonna do it again, just double check my work. 1, this is 1 right here. And then taking that unit, going over. We're a little bit over, or sorry, just under 2. Okay, so it's like less than 2. But if we round that up, right? Because I would say that like from here to here, compare here to here, we're just under 2. I can round up and just call it 5 by 2. All right. So what these numbers, what they really mean is that if we take these units, right? And we start with the basic unit of a head. In the first part of the project, in the video, I'll illustrate that we always begin with the head. You start to shape your clay, and let's say that, okay, just given the example that I have here, I'm going to zoom out. Let's say that for the fist of clay, like I was talking about with Casey later, if this is your basic unit, which is a head, if your fist size, Casey, was this amount, will you end up with a small project or a pretty big project? What do you think?
Small.
So if this is your basic unit, right? This is a head right here, like fist size.
Oh, yeah, sorry. It would be a pretty big one.
It'd be a pretty big project. And that's what I would probably assign to an advanced student. So when you start coming up with your basic unit, right? The basic unit, the first size that you need to establish is going to be the head. And so what you could do is just, okay, when you get your fist of clay on Friday, you're obviously going to get about 3.5. But instead of making the head as big as your fist, right, you may do half a fist just for the head. Does that make sense? Because you're going to come up with your own size. My minimum, right, length is really, a minimum is about the length of your hand from your wrist all the way to your fingertips. I'm giving you a minimum size, but really you have to budget your own clay. You used about a fist size, which is not a lot of clay. You probably used a little bit more if you needed to patch up your clay, but for the most part, you have about, I don't know, 23 pounds of clay left. You probably used about 2 pounds of it at the most. And so for your project, you want to begin to think about, well, how much clay am I going to need, right? In a classroom setting where, we're in person, a lot of you guys will just say, hey, Mr. Alba, do I have enough? Do I have enough, right? You basically want to take your first unit of clay, which is going to be your head, and you're going to want to take your fist and I would budget about half the size of a fist to begin with the head. And then from there, you can kind of size up how much clay you'll need to split your clay up according to the animal that you have.